Have you ever walked into a room and flipped a light switch and nothing happened? You stand there for a second, you flip it again. And then you flip it even harder the third time because clearly electricity didn't quite understand how serious you were. And in that moment, you have a decision to make. You can either stand there in the dark and complain about the light switch, or you can ask yourself where there's another source of light. Now that moment is not just about electricity. That moment is about life. That moment requires a new plan. Because each and every one of us are going to walk into a room at some point, expecting a switch to work, and it doesn't. The job changes, the relationship ends, the confidence disappears. And in that moment, that is when your choice matters the most. Not when everything's working, but when it's not. That's when you need to flip the switch. Now, growing up, Friday night was takeout night. And that was way before Uber Eats or DoorDash. You actually had to pick up the phone and you had to call in your order and then you had to wait to go and pick it up. Now, for a 5-year-old, that was quite an exciting logistics operation. And I used to get excited when my mom would ask me to put in the family order. And she would stand right next to me and she would dictate every word. And I would repeat everything she said, most of the time. And when the food would arrive, I would act completely surprised that there was an extra dessert or two. I mean, she was standing right next to me when I put in that order. Who ordered that extra chocolate chip cookie anyways? It couldn't have been the 5-year-old who had access to the phone and a strong belief in plausible deniability. You see, my mom is deaf. And I grew up at a very early age being her ears and being her mouthpiece when needed. And that role became much bigger one day. It was an ordinary day, a sunny day, back in 1980. It was an ordinary day until it wasn't. My dad was working on the roof, building a new bedroom because my mom was 7 months pregnant. And I was playing in the backyard. And suddenly I heard a crack, and then a thud, and then silence. My dad had just fallen off the roof. And so I went running into the house to find my mom, but my mom couldn't hear my screams. And so instinctively, I picked up the phone just like I was calling takeout or maintenance. But this was anything but routine. And the paramedics came and they were gushing rapid medical information as they were carrying my unconscious father onto a stretcher. My mom was terrified because she couldn't hear a word of what they were saying, but I could. And I was the only one who could. And so I climbed into that ambulance with them. I remember my heart was beating so hard, I thought it was going to jump out of my Rainbow Bright t-shirt. This wasn't about ordering extra dessert anymore. This was about life and death, and a role far bigger than I thought I was capable of playing. But that moment didn't care how old I was. That moment didn't care to wait for me to grow up. That moment asked me to decide. And amidst the sirens and the fear and the heavy responsibility to translate every word from my mom, I flipped the switch. Not because I was ready, but because I was needed. My dad survived the fall. And I stepped out of that ambulance a different girl than I walked in. I flipped the switch. Now, flipping the switch is that moment where you stop waiting for certainty, for permission, or for confidence, and you just decide anyway. It's that moment where you decide who you're becoming before the world ever has proof. And then the plan becomes easy, but not simple. You must change the story you have about yourself, you must stop asking for permission, and you must dream bigger. Now let's start with the first one. The most important switch of all is the story in which you believe about yourself. Now, I have led people across industries, across countries, and moments of change. And one thing that has been very clear for me is that people don't stay stuck because they lack ability. They stay stuck because they're loyal to an outdated version of who they're allowed to become. And I understand that because I was the only girl growing up in an Italian family in a Roman Catholic upbringing. And I learned my role early. I learned when to speak. I learned when to stay silent. I learned when to take a step back. I learned when to be strong. And I learned when to lean in to help others. And don't get me wrong, those roles can shape us. but they can also shrink us. The question you need to ask yourself today is, what is the outdated story that you're still obeying? Because flipping the switch is not about becoming someone else. It's about not holding back the person that you're meant to become. So before you make any changes in your life today, before you change jobs, before you end relationships or build boundaries, you must first change the identity from which you're making those decisions from. And that's where possibility starts, from the story that you're brave enough to change. And once you start seeing yourself differently, well, then an even greater power switch comes into play. That is giving yourself permission to let go of the version of you that got you here. And that's a little bit tricky sometimes, because you could be standing in front of that next door of opportunity and it's not locked, but yet you're standing there, you're waiting, you're hesitating, waiting for someone to open that door and let you in. And that's where permission becomes a barrier. And permission is a little bit tricky because sometimes it can look like the right thing to do, but oftentimes it is fear dressed up as respect. And I see this so often in business, a woman who's staring at a job posting. She has checked every single box. She's perfect for the role. And yet she hesitates. She waits to apply. Or the man who's sitting in the parking lot before he walks into the office, he's completely overwhelmed because he knows he needs to help out more at home, but he's afraid to ask his boss for the time. These are two different stories, but the same switch. Somehow along the way, permission has become a habit and not a requirement. And I lived this myself. When I was getting a divorce, I was looking to my parents for permission, the Roman Catholic Church, the version of me that thought I needed consensus in order to move on. And that is a very complicated place to stand, because when your life is no longer aligned with your truth, that decision becomes personal. You're no longer leaving something behind, you're also choosing who you're becoming. And you have to ask yourself, am I protecting the peace around me or the truth inside me? And that's when I made the call, not because it was easy and not because my parents suddenly thought divorce was a great idea, but because it was necessary for my life. That is the permission switch that I learned. Not that I needed to make someone capable, that I was capable, but first for me to believe that I didn't need to ask someone to tell me that I was. And so if you are waiting for permission on anything today, stop waiting. Do the thing, say the thing, apply for the next job, because I guarantee you the life that you truly desire is not one that requires approval. It requires you to make a decision. You need to flip your own switch. And once you stop waiting for permission, something powerful happens. Your imagination comes back. Not the safe version, not the edited version, but the real one. The one that asks, what if I can do more, I can dream more, I can become more? That's where possibilities become a choice. Now, ladies and gentlemen, size does matter. Your dream size. People don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they aim at the altitude of their current life. Big dreams don't come true because we sit here and talk about them today. 2 words make big dreams come true. Are you listening? Listen carefully. Hard work. Now I know, not as sexy and glamorous as manifestation, but it's definitely more reliable. And I learned that when I was ready for my next role. I wanted more responsibility, a bigger impact, a bigger stage outside of Canada. But there was no logical next step for me in my company. I could have stayed where I was, it was comfortable, but that would have made me play it safe. And so after a mentoring conversation, something clicked inside me. I didn't have to wait in front of that door waiting for someone to open it up for me. I could build that door myself. And that's what I did. I went and built a business case for my very own next role. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't ask for a promotion. I stopped asking what's available, and I asked myself, what role does not exist today that could completely transform the future of this business? And what if I'm the one to lead it? And that's what I did. And the company not only saw me differently, but I became the first president, the first woman to step into a larger North American executive role overseeing Canada, US, and Mexico. And that moment changed every boardroom and every door I walk through, because the most powerful opportunities are the ones that you design yourself. And so today, when I'm faced with a tough decision, I talk to my future self. And here's what I ask her. Is this getting me closer to the woman I'm becoming, or is it keeping me stuck in the woman that I've outgrown? Because that's when possibilities become a choice. Possibilities don't arrive in a perfect plan. Possibilities arrive often in a dark room with a broken light switch and a moment asking you, now what? When I think back to that ambulance, I don't think about how scared I was. I think about what's next. She didn't grow up in that ambulance. She decided in that ambulance. And that decision she would go on for the rest of her life, proving over and over again. The possibilities expand the moment you choose yourself. And so I ask you, we go back to the beginning with a broken light switch. Ask yourself, what is the story about yourself that you need to change? What is the permission that you need to stop asking for? And what are the possibilities that you're making too small? Because you don't grow into a new life, you decide into it. You flip your own switch. And once you do, possibilities will meet you there. The lights will go on, the opportunities appear, and the truth will become visible. Your possibilities will become probabilities, because the switch you need to flip is not outside of you. It never was. Thank you.